Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another edition of WOWSA Live. We're here with two very special guests and my co-host, Antonio Arguelles. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all you.
Good morning.
Hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
And
we always start with this program live from Mexico City. Is WOWSA Live?
Yes, yes. Yeah. So I'd like both of you to introduce yourselves. Take as much time as you can. Don't be shy. And why don't you start off?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Stephen and Toño Arguelles, a great friend of mine and sponsor as Ibar also. I want to thank you for having me here with you today. And well, my name is Hugo Rodriguez Barroso. I was City, 1961, and well, I was a swimmer since I was a swimmer since I was 8 years old, and then I became a long distance swimmer, and after that, a mountain climber, basically.
Well, not just a mountain climber. So you did what we call the peak and pond, and for those people who don't understand what the peak and pond is. Can you explain it briefly?
Well, I had a chance to swim the English Channel back in 1986, and after two attempts, and then 1997, I climbed Everest for the first time, and I need to say that both experiences changed my life. As a matter of fact, the thing is that when I tried to swim the English Channel the first time in 1985, I swam for 51 kilometers, and I was totally finished. I couldn't finish my swim. Had hypothermia, and I was just 3 kilometers away from the other shore. And I say that changed my life because then I understood that I had to undertake my goals in a very serious manner, and I started training very hard. And then after my first swim in the channel in 1986, I started training very hard in the mountains. So I ended in Everest, and during the first expedition to Everest, I couldn't make it back after the summit. So I had to survive nearly 34 hours above 26,000 feet, just very few feet below the summit. I had to spend the night with no oxygen, no tent, sleeping bag, -45, and also that changed my life.
Wow. We're going to get back to that. And Ivar?
I think before I start on me, I think for me the most impressive thing Hugo has done is what was that crossing you did? All butterfly. Swimming butterfly.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
What did you do? I didn't know this.
Yeah, I swam from Cozumel to Cancun, 70 kilometers butterfly. And well, that was really very tough, as Ivar is saying, yeah.
How many hours did that take you?
Like 13 hours.
Oh.
13 hours butterfly. That's pretty impressive. So Hugo's in your guys' club.
Wow.
Crazy people club.
Yes, but tell your story. Your story is also very, very interesting.
Well, mine's not so crazy, but I was actually born in the United States, Mexican father, American mother, and I was born in Wisconsin.
Okay.
But then we moved to Mexico when I was about a year old, a little over a year old. So I grew up in Mexico. Started swimming at about 10. I'm like Toño. I'm one of the children of the Mexico Olympics, so to speak. One of those people that saw the Olympics in our own country and said, I want to be an Olympian. And that basically just shaped my life from then on. I decided, even though I was living in Mexico, I decided to go to high school to the United States to further my Olympic dream. I went to Deerfield Academy in Massachusetts for 4 years. And then I went to Stanford to continue to move on in swimming, so to speak, because I was mainly a swimmer. But thanks to going to the States in high school, you have to do 3 sports. And so I was always decent at running. So I started running cross country and track and field in high school. And my second year at Stanford, and Toño knows what it feels like to be in a pool where you've got Olympic champions and world record holders in your lane next to you and ahead of you. And it's overwhelming. And in the preseason, one of the Stanford swimmers, we were out running and way ahead of everybody else. And he says, "You should try modern pentathlon." I had no idea what that was. And it turns out that there was this Olympic sport for athletes that are a little more, have a more variety of skills, basically for good runners, swimmers that can then pick up the other sports. And that's where my second year at Stanford, I learned to fence and to ride a horse and to shoot. And I went on to go to 3 Olympic Games in modern pentathlon. And also competed in triathlon, a professional triathlete for 2 years in the 80s when it was starting. And then I retired after my 3rd Olympics, and I've just done a bunch of jobs. Also, I've been a sports minister in Mexico for 6 years. I was president of a football club, Chivas, which is a very popular football club here in Mexico, and which Toño loves. And then I organized the Pan American Games in Guadalajara in 2011. That was a really great experience. And I'm currently the Secretary General of Pan Am Sports, which is the Pan American Sports Organization that organizes the Pan American Games and has the 41 Olympic committees grouped together in the Americas. And so we have a very busy days these past few weeks with the Olympics and the postponement of the Olympic Games and all that. It's been a challenging time currently for everybody.
Yes. I mean, first of all, a challenging time just balancing all the different sports. I mean, that's got to be just pressure, stressful every single day.
And I'm gonna, the reason I'm speaking to the wrong group in this, but the reason I switched to pentathlon, I was at Stanford, and originally the coach was Jim Goran, who's a very renowned and well-known coach in the 60s, 70s at Stanford. And he hired this young assistant called Debbie Meyer. I don't know if you remember Debbie Meyer.
Yes.
She won 3 gold medals at the Mexico City Olympics, the best distance swimmer in the world in the late 60s. And she came on as his assistant coach, and our mileage doubled. So we were going maybe 7,000 yards a day. We went to 15,000, at Stanford. So and it turned out that I was swimming in the morning, swimming in the afternoon, and then at night I would start dreaming that I was swimming. I said, "This is too much swimming." So as I say, I'm speaking to the wrong group of people, and that's when pentathlon just looked really good. And all of a sudden I'm out running in the beautiful golf course 3-4 days a week. I'm learning to ride a horse, learning to get up from the ground because the horse throws you off a lot at the beginning, learning to handle a pistol, and then learning to fence, which actually is a really fun sport to do. It's not fun to watch, but it's a really fun sport to do because it's a combat sport, without getting hit like the boxers. So pentathlon is actually a really fun sport in general. It's a balance. You balance the physical with the technical and the skills. And it's a fun, it's not a well-known sport. It's a hard sport because you have to learn all these skills, but it's actually a fun sport, and some very good athletes are take part in pentathlon. So it's a different kind of sport, but it's an interesting sport.
Yeah, and the roots of pentathlon, you were explaining to me earlier, are very, very interesting. Can you explain how this sport came about?
It's interesting because the creator of modern pentathlon is actually Pierre de Coubertin, the creator of the Olympic Games. It was his idea. In the ancient games of the ancient Greece, they used to have the pentathlon. And the pentathlon in ancient Greece was the skills a soldier needed back in those times. And that was, they would throw a javelin, They would throw a discus, which were two weapons. They would run 200 meters and do a standing long jump. And the best two athletes at the end would wrestle each other. So all combat skills. That was the original pentathlon. So Pierre de Coubertin said, I want to make a sport which will determine the most complete athlete of the games. And you're talking, this is 1906, 1908, he started to dream of this idea. And he put together this strange combination, which was basically kind of a cavalry officer in the early 20th century. And he put together the sports. And what they say is they say it's a military messenger who has to take a message across enemy lines. So he sets out on his horse, has to jump over obstacles. Eventually his horse gets shot down. So he continues running on foot, has to shoot at his opponents, or at the opposite army, at the enemy. Then he runs out of bullets and he has to fence his way through, swim across a river, and run to deliver the message. That's kind of the story they've created behind Pierre de Coubertin's sport. So so we're basically DHL or Federal Express employees from back then.
Wow, amazing. And then I want to ask you, you're swimming across the English Channel and training as a swimmer. So you're using a lot of your upper body. And then all of a sudden you're climbing Mount Everest and you have to use your lower body. So how do you make that transition from an upper body dominated athlete to a lower body dominated athlete?
That is true, and that's a very good point of view. I mean, one of the hardest things to do was to switch from a long distance swimmer to a climber. And as you said, training is totally different. And not only that, but when you're swimming at sea, you have plenty oxygen. You have no issues with oxygen. When you're climbing, especially in the Himalayas, then the more you climb, the less oxygen you find. And that's a huge challenge. What I did is that I was climbing Popocatépetl, which is like 18,000 feet high. I was climbing Popocatépetl every Saturday, almost every Saturday. And then Iztaccíhuatl, which is another mountain just close to Popocatépetl. They're 2 hours away from Mexico City. And I used to sleep on the top of Iztaccíhuatl almost every weekend. I mean, at least for the very last 2 months before my expedition. And that gave me a strength to at least adapt myself to live at base camp. Base camp is almost as high as Iztaccíhuatl and Popocatépetl. So I was not worried about really being able to stay for 2 months on base camp. I was worried about acclimatize myself to high altitude because I had to climb all the way to 28,000 feet. And on average, you have base camp and then 4 camps. Camp 4 is at 26,000 feet. I mean, that's really, really high. And you have like probably 1/3 of oxygen. So I would say that's a great challenge as a long distance swimmer, as a swimmer, but also I think that being a swimmer gives you so much advantage because as we all agree, I'm pretty sure, I mean, because Tonio and me and Ibar, we have talked about this. When you're a swimmer, you need to train very hard. I mean, you swim like a lot. I mean, sometimes you have to swim 20 kilometers a day, and that gives you an outstanding strength. So when you're climbing, you're not going to be worried about your strength, your physical condition, because you have it there, and you have it there from years back. So the thing here, when you're climbing, you need to be very smart while you're trying to get used to the lack of oxygen. And that's, let's say, kind of not so difficult if you're just taking easy. If you climb to camp 1, then you get back to base camp, you take a rest for 3. days, 4 days, then you go camp 2. And if you're doing this process in a smart way, I think that you're ready to go all the way to the summit.
Wow. Wow. And then Ivar, you and all of us here, we start out as swimmers. And swimmers are very coordinated if we do freestyle, breaststroke, backstroke, butterfly. But now you've got to be on a horse. You've got to be, using a sword to fence, shooting. All of this, is he's using different muscles, different parts of his body to swim or climb a mountain. You're using all different kind of techniques, from translating from swimming to running to fencing to shooting. How do you learn that? How do you manage to shoot a gun well and fence well and ride a horse well?
So in my case, I probably started a little bit late. In other words, I discovered this sport when I was 18, almost 19 years old, and I'd never ridden a horse really, as you need to ride a horse to get to jump over 4-foot fences, and that it's a different skill set. Never fenced, and I never really shot a pistol, or other than at the fairs or something of that sort. So yes, it's completely different. Not only is it physical, it's mental. It's a different mentality. And I would say I was very close to winning the Olympic medal in Los Angeles. I finished 7th and our team was 5th. So we were pretty close to the medals. I basically lost the medal in the shooting event. I was probably the best runner, swimmer in the world, the combination of those physical sports. But a shooter has to be, it's not just different physically, it's mentally. It's more of a Zen, people that can remain calm and not let their pulse shoot up. And it's a different personality almost, no? And a fencer needs to be aggressive, but at the same time kind of deceitful. So, and then in the riding, you need to make sure you have empathy and synchronicity with the horse, because in pentathlon, they're not our own horses. You go wherever you go in the world, they provide the horses, and it's the draw, and you have 20 minutes to get to know your horse. You make it a really strong, fiery, horse that wants to jump, or you make it a lazy horse, which basically is trying to get out of every jump, and you need to push the horse onward. So you need to learn these different, I'd say more skills, but yeah, I mean, certainly different muscle groups. You develop a more rounded physique than just from swimming. I mean, you look at the top level swimmers in the Olympics, their lower body generally are not very well developed. It's mostly from the waist up, And so I think when you look at fencers or even cyclists, for example, they have very strong lower bodies, and they try to minimize their upper body. So pentathlon, I think, is you just need to have a more rounded physique, and I think that just helps. I think it's kind of a good lifetime sport, or I think just cross training and doing different sports, I think is a healthy way to do it. And I know even Tonio, who keeps doing these crazy distance things, I know he still cross trains a lot, and I think that helps keep them healthy. And I think in general, my message from all of this, from a training perspective, and I think Hugo also ratified that, is if you do a little more cross training, I think it helps you overall from a health and injury free kind of for us that like to continue to be active into our latter years.
Yeah. And both of you have spoken about the mental part of your sport. Can you speak, why do you think swimmers, both of you came from the swimming world, were so tough in your land activities? Is swimmers are accustomed to training so hard, and you're only looking down at the bottom of the pool, and now you're looking up at an ocean or on the top of a mountain, or in your case, trying to win a medal with a gun? How do you train your mind to achieve what you're trying to achieve? Go ahead.
So one of the things I didn't mention, but I was also a swim coach for about 6-8 years when I dropped out of Stanford to do pentathlon. In other words, I told my parents, I'm going to drop out of Stanford. They said, that's fine, but you're going to have to find a job. And the job I found was to be a swim coach. And that made me really get into and study the swimming kind of as a science from everything that was available back then. I think swimmers are one of the most disciplined athletes in the world. And I saw this from kids that were 7 or 8 years old all the way up to older swimmers. The level of self-discipline that a swimmer has, I haven't seen in many other sports. That they're able to get up at 4:15 every morning to go to the 5 a.m. workout and do this 10, 12, 15 times a week. And the level of punishment and pain you have to endure to be a successful swimmer, I think it's just, and as you said, the monotony a little bit. And, you talk to some really good athletes from other sports and they say, I don't know how a swimmer does it. I couldn't do that, to just be in the same doing the same activity. So I think it makes you mentally very strong. When the coach says we're going to go 10 times 1,000 or we're going to do 100 hundreds, which Antonio loves to do that series.
That's a great series. Now I have a new one. 10 1,000s.
How much?
Now the 10 1,000s.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the new Toño.
If you think that's fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Crazy,
I'm
right?
doing that tomorrow.
So I mean, here, Toño just explained why swimmers are successful and have mental discipline it takes to be successful. And, a lot of swimmers, and, one of the people I competed against in triathlon just once was a very young Lance Armstrong in one of the triathlons I did. I actually passed him in the running. He was still not as well-rounded as he got to be later on. He came from swimming as well,
Yes.
So I'm sure a lot of his success had to do with the discipline you get from swimming. That's certain.
Yes. Hugo, can you explain it in a very concrete way what you had to think about when you were at top of Mount Everest and you had to stay there for how many? You stayed there a whole night, a whole day, right? Up at the Mount Everest when you were trapped at the top.
Yeah, that's right. Well, first of all, once you reach the summit, you're so glad that you don't have to climb anything more in the mountain. I mean, you get very happy, and just the feeling of being on top of Everest, the top of the world, is amazing. The fact is that you cannot stay in the summit for more than, let's say, half an hour. So what happened back in 1997 is that when I was climbing to Camp 4, and once at Camp 4, I had this flu and I had fever, and then I was kind of weak. So I had decided if I should climb all the way up to the summit, or I just had to turn around and get back to base camp. But I mean, I had tried 2 years to go to Everest to join this expedition. And I decided to try to go out and to push for summit. So when I made it to summit, I was very tired. And once I was heading back and right the Hillary step, I suddenly lost my energy. I just couldn't move. I fell down and I just couldn't stand up. There was still a Sherpa with me. We were the only two people on the mountain, around the summit. And then I explained to him that I just couldn't go down, that he had to go down, otherwise we both would die. And he understood that, so he went back to base camp. But I didn't have any energy to try my descent, so I had to stay there. And not minding that you never sleep at such altitude. I just fall asleep, and I slept for like probably 2 hours. When it was 5:30 p.m., I woke up, and then I realized I was in trouble because I was right there at Hillary Step with no energy, and there was a storm coming, heading to the point where I was. And I understood that I had to go down at least for 100 feet, or if possible, a little bit more than that. So I found my way to stand up, and then I had to climb up South Summit, and I had no energy. I mean, South Summit is not really very high, but I didn't have any energy. And God helped me on my mountain, and as a swimmer, and I managed to climb up to South Summit, and then I just had to try to reach like 8,600 meters, where I thought that I was going to be more protected from the storm. And so once I was there, I decided to stay, because it was going to be no storm could kill me, and I decided to stay around 8,600 meters above sea level, just 300 away from, less than 300 meters away from the summit. And I stayed there all night long until 5 a.m. in the morning with no oxygen, no sleeping bag, no tent. And the reason I think I'm still here is because God gave me an opportunity, and my mountain gave me a chance. I found myself able to be part of the mountain. I think that helped me a lot. And then I managed to go down to Camp 4 the day after, and I arrived to Camp 4 around 9 morning. And that's what happened first expedition.
If I can interject, just I actually read this description, Hugo's book, so it's a good time to put in an ad for his book, just like Tony, for very good books that describe the experience. And I clearly remember he said at some point he understood that he might not live through the night, which I think is a pretty impressive realization that you realize that you may, that you learn, you could have die, and you basically put yourself, I guess, in God's hands, or in destiny and fate, whatever's going to happen. But I think that's a pretty strong realization at that moment.
Right.
And the other thing, Hugo, that I guess you didn't mention is the fact that when you decide to sleep that night. I remember you make it like a cave. You went in a moment that when you told me the story, that it was very impressive, is when you tried to put the adrenaline injection.
Yeah, that's right. When I was at the Hillary Step, and I couldn't find any energy to keep on descending. I had 2 injections, and then I tried to use those, but once I opened them, they were totally frozen, just like in, no time. It was so fast. And so I didn't have any other resource to go down. So in the end, I managed to go down the day after. And I want to thank Ivar Antonio, because Ivar, he sponsored me 3 times. Antonio, he sponsored me 3 times as well. But not only in my first expedition, but they trust me, and I was able to go back to the mountain in 1999 and year 2000. When I was heading back to Camp 4 the first time, there was a point when I just looked at the mountain and I asked the mountain, what was that I had to do? Because the mountain allowed me to be alive. And I didn't know what to do back then, but then in 1999 and year 2000, I went back went all the way up to Camp 4, 26,000 feet, and with a group of Sherpas, we brought down nearly 500 kilos of, that's like almost 1,000 pounds, I believe. It was the way I could thank my mountain of what the mountain allowed me. I mean, I'm a survivor because of God. These two guys, I'm thankful with them. And the rest of my life.
Just a question, I'll have.
Challenge is you have to swim 100 meters. It can be short course under your age. 60 seconds last year. So I'm hoping to stay faster than my age in the 100 meters.
No, my counting is different. I just want to see how many more hours can I swim as I go older. So now I'm up to 24. So I'll see how far I can go. When we were training for Mount Everest, because after I finished my first English channel, I decided I personally enjoyed when you and I were up in the mountain is how well you knew the mountain. And I remember suddenly, we're on top of on Ixtlacihuatl, and suddenly we're covered by we have all these clouds coming down on us. And I'd ask you, how are we gonna find our way down? And you said, look, I'll show you. And then you lower yourself to the floor and say, look, if we lower ourselves to the floor, we'll find our way. And I remember that as one of the greatest experiences, because I was so afraid that. How did you learn to read the mountain?
Well, I think that as you, Toño, and Ibar just said earlier, I think the more you train, the better you're ready to face any kind of condition. I mean, if you train very hard, if you're there in the mountain as often as you can, then you just absorb the energy, and also you get involved in the mountain as if it was your home. And then I think that's the best way to learn any kind of sports. That I think that training or practice is like the main rule of all of this. Also for your mental condition, as Ibar said. So I think that whatever you're going to do in your life, you really need to be very committed, and you need to be totally focused, and you need to practice, as Americans say.
Yeah, I have it. What really strikes me as incredible is, of course, you guys are practicing. Of course, you do different training, etc. But you failed across the English Channel your first time. You had a very traumatic and difficult summit, but you continued to try to do the English Channel. You continued to return to Mount Everest again. And Ivar, in your case, it must have been difficult. Every time you fall off the horse, you have to get back on. Swimming and running, I understand you can handle it, but all of the new sports, it's a process of failure and then going again. Fail, get better. Fail, get better and better. What drives you two gentlemen to overcome that failure? I mean, a lot of people can say, it's over, it's finished, it's okay. But you two continue to challenge yourself in every way. Can you explain your drive?
I think it has a lot to do with how much you want to get your goal. In my case, my goal at first was to be an Olympian. And I remember this was right after the '68 Olympics. I grew up in in the city, about an hour south of Mexico City, Cuernavaca. And the coach brought us all together and said, we just saw the Olympics. I want everybody to look around and raise your hand if you raised our hand. But I was the only one of that group to become an Olympian. And it's just that I was obsessed with that. It's, you know, to do whatever you have to do to get to the goal. And the goal is it drives you every single day. You wake up and you're thinking of the goal. And I know Toño and Hugo understand this very well, because they're two very driven individuals. You know, I brought a lot of swimmers over to pentathlon, people that were kind of tired of just swimming and wanted to do pentathlon. I could tell if they were going to be successful the first time they fell off a horse. You know, did they bounce right back up even though it hurt, or did they walk away from the horse kind of, you know, rubbing their butt because it had hurt, the fall had hurt them. And you can tell right away who has that drive and who doesn't, you know, and who can overcome these setbacks. And in that sense, yeah, the people that reach their goals have to be really obsessed every day with reaching them. And I think that's the strength. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, because everybody in this group has that kind of mentality, but it's definitely, I think, what it takes from my perspective.
Wow, thank you. Hugo, and you?
Well, I totally agree. I mean, you need to try, and you need to try, and you need to try it again. And the more you try with passion, strength, discipline, I think that will give you the chance to achieve your goals. And also, I believe that sometimes we just look at what we accomplished, but sometimes we fail more than that we accomplished. And that's very important, because it becomes part of your life. You understand that you're not going to win every single time. And I think that gives you even more strength. So as Ibar said, you just need to be committed. And it's not very hard to be committed. Just you need to be convinced, not only of what you're doing, but of yourself. And I think that's the key.
Yeah. Where is this photo? How high are you on this photo that Antonio is sharing with us?
That's the summit. That's the summit
okay.
of Everest. And that was the first expedition. Just half an hour after that photo was taken, I was in trouble when I couldn't go down. I couldn't go back to Camp 4. Yeah, that's a beautiful place.
Those are the prayer flags, yes. Aren't they?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Why you took those with you?
Well, no, I didn't take them, but Sherpas that climbed that day 2 hours before, and Sherpas, they always fix the flags everywhere they go, and it's part of like, let's say, a ceremony to the mountain. And that's very beautiful, because when you arrive to base camp, just the beginning of the expedition, you join the Sherpas with this Tibetan ceremony, and you fix the praying flags at base camp, then Camp 2, and also on the summit of Everest.
I want to shift a little bit to what you gentlemen, including you, Antonio, would advise the young athletes. So we have this unfortunate coronavirus around the world. And Ivar, you know very well the impact of delaying Olympics 1 year. So all of these athletes are focused on going to Tokyo and representing themselves and their country. And all of a sudden, it's 1 year in the future. I'd like to hear from all three of you. What advice would you give those young athletes? If you were their coach and you put your arm around them, what would you whisper in their ear? What would you advise them to do? Go ahead, any one of you.
So this has been a big issue with the Olympic athletes or Olympic hopefuls from all over the continent. This year, we've actually had a lot of videos, and we've organized a series of through the Pan Am Sports channel. We have talks with experts, and the first two we had, because those were the ones that were most requested, was for the mental and the mental health side. With two experts, one from Spain for the Spanish speakers, and then an American for the English speakers. And they both really spoke about that. One, we have to first accept what you can't change, and we can't change this. There's things beyond our control, and we need to accept that first. And basically look at the things that we can control and try to focus on the things that are under our control, which is the kind of training that we can do in our current situation. In the case of the Olympic athletes, also understanding that everything is moved back a year, that there's no reason to overstress because of that. But I think the main message that I got from both of these experts in the field of mental training was that you really need to focus on the things you can control, and really make everything from the perspective of your own initiative, what things that you can do, really focus on that. Otherwise, everything else is just, it's kind of a useless exercise in worrying and giving yourself stress you don't need. So, we all hope this is a temporary situation, something which will be over in hopefully 3 or 4 months at the most. And so basically we need to make the most of this time. And a lot of the advice also was, it's a good chance to refresh, maybe to read some books you haven't read, to learn something you've been wanting to learn, to use this time to do something productive that will help you be a better person, be a better swimmer, be a better whatever it is you're trying to be after this is over.
Is there a website where people, swimmers and other athletes, can listen to these two talks, one in Spanish, one in English?
Yes, there is. It's our normal website. You can go from there to the channel. It's Pan Am Sports, panamsports.org,
Okay.
.org, or panamsportschannel.org. And these talks are there for Spanish and English speakers, and they can look at them even though they were held last week.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, Stephen, I'm not an Olympic, and I was never an Olympic athlete, as you all know, but I was training for my double crossing of the English Channel. And I guess obviously I'm not in the same spot as, the young Olympia hopefuls, but I have dealt, and this is what my suggestion I would give to one of these athletes is, don't despair, because as Ivar says, there's nothing you can do about it. In terms of the Olympics, at least you have a new date, and that's June of next year. In the case of the channel, we don't know what's going to happen. I talked to Mike Oram, and he doesn't know what's going to happen. But I think this idea that you just have to live with it and understand that there's nothing you can do to change it. It's a great advice. And then the second one I would give is keep going. Life is always full of surprises. And if you cannot adapt to different circumstances, you will never be able to survive. And this is a moment that I think a lot of the athletes, it's going to be a big shift. Those who can adapt and say, look, I will take this time to do different things, mental training, read books, do something different, and deal with it. And they're the ones who are going to feel the weight of the change and won't be able to overcome it.
Yeah, thank you. And Hugo, you?
Oh yeah, thank you. Well, what I would say is that every single day that you have trained counts, and counts a lot. And that's going to give you a great advantage So you need to be confident on your training for years back. And also, I think that they need to be calm and understand that everyone is facing the same circumstances. So it is what it is. And in the end, they have the strength and they have the ability to get back on track and to do as well as they were just doing 1 month ago. And I'm pretty sure they won't have just that because they have this in their heart and they're the best athletes in the world.
Thank you. And I want to end up, and you could explain as long as you want, but you're all over 50 years old, but I can see the drive within you. What is 1 or 2 or 3 things that each of you want to accomplish from this point on? Your lives have been so incredible. You've achieved so much. You're the leaders in your field, but give us some things, your goals from this point forward. Go ahead, one at a time. Yeah.
You know, I think we're at a stage in our lives where, and Antonio's very active in this. It's one, you want to give back. You know, whether it's as a coach, as a teacher, as a through initiatives, a nonprofit, or even business ventures. But you want to give back. You want to try to and teach other people and give back. Because it's only, I think it's only fair, you know, when you're at this stage in your life that you're able to help others along, and I think this is something that's good. But the other thing that I found, and I think everybody needs to understand their own true self, is I enjoy competing, and I'm probably going to enjoy competing till I'm 90 or whatever my limit is. I just that I'm very competitive.
I know. Just now.
Understands this. And
just now.
So I'm gonna continue swimming masters and doing masters triathlon, and you know, trying to beat people 10 or 20 years younger than me. It's just the way I am, you know. And I think we need to accept who we are, especially this late in life. Can't really change it, and you know, and it's just something I enjoy it. And that means, of course, that means trying to stay healthy, trying to eat well, trying to train, you know, wisely, as opposed to just going hard all the time. It's just, you know, interesting. I train at 1 hour, 1.5 hours a day. That's all I train. So I consider myself a high-level athlete still. So I'm still kind of training with the same intensity, because that's who I am. You know, you have to learn to accept who you are, enjoy it. And the other part is you know, and it's especially hard right now, but you know, stay in touch with your friends, I think, and with your family. It's just, you know, keep that social connection, I think, is also one of the biggest things that you can do to have a good quality of life at this stage of our lives.
You know, I will give the word, you know, the microphone to Hugo so he can make his comment. But just to understand, Stephen, in our audience, how competitive everybody is. I mean, we've been friends for many, many years, and I'm the godfather of his son, who's the goalie for the LA soccer team. So I get a message from him that said, "You won't believe my workout." And so he tells me the workout. I mean, he's enjoying because he knows I'm not going to be able to keep his pace. And I know he wants to put it in my face that he's, you know, going, you know, doing this repetitions at 120, 115, and you know, he's very good at that. So my response is, I'll see you next week at 15, 16 degrees water, and we're going to swim for 5 hours. So I have to level with him, because otherwise I will feel trash all the time. So that's how competitive, and you know, and we're both over 60. So that gives you an example. Hugo, what do you want to accomplish?
Well, thank you very much. One of the things I've been doing while practicing sports, and especially in these 3 expeditions to Everest, is that I have mixed it with a social campaign. And again, I was able to do that because of Toño and Ibar. Thanks to them, I was doing an environmental expedition in year 2000, and I still want to do more of this. As a matter of fact, right now, I'm in a project. I have a foundation, and I just created last year an index to measure the impact of anybody in the planet, any person, not minding race or gender, anything, to understand what's the impact each of us provoke to Earth. I call it Hugo Index, not because of my name, but it means Habitat Undoing and Greenhouse Emissions Outrage Index. And that's one of the things I want to promote. Go to Everest tomorrow, I would go to Everest tomorrow. But that's not easy. I mean, of course, not Everest is closed this year. But I mean, if I had a chance to go next year or year after, what I'm planning to do in 23 years' time is to become the oldest guy to climb Everest. So wow. I still have a little time to train.
How old will you be at that time? In 23 years.
I'm 59 now. I mean, last week it was my birthday. I have like 22, 23 years to get ready for my expedition to Everest, to be the oldest guy to climb all the way up to the summit. So the guy who's the oldest is 81 years old. So I need to be 82.
Steve, I think you're talking to 360-year-olds that think they're 40. They think they're 40 still.
Yeah, well, I interviewed another man. He was 60 years old, and I asked him, how old is he? And he says, I'm 29. And I said, you don't look 29. He says, no, I celebrated my 29th birthday 31 years. But this has been, I could sit here and listen to you gentlemen for hours and hours and hours. But I'm glad, Antonio, you put up Hugo's book. I'm going to order it on Amazon today. I'm going to listen to the talks that the Spanish-speaking and the English-speaking American, psychologists or whomever gave to your athletes. This is wonderful. And Antonio, I have your book on my reading list. So all three of you are going to keep us motivated for a long, long time. And I thank you very, very much for your time. Antonio, do you have any last?
Yes. Well, I would like to thank Hugo and Ibarra. They accepted our invitation, Stephen. And just for our audience, next week we're going to have two women in our program, and both of them are very good friends of Hugo, Ibarra, and myself. We're going to hear from Carla Willock, how she summited the 7 summits, which is always when we talk about the Ocean 7, we say that it's the equivalent. And we'll have Marielle Holle, who did last year, Ocean 7. And it'll be a really interesting talk because we're going to see again 2 different views of 2 persons who are both very accomplished, not only athletes, but people. And that would be interesting. So we hope our audience comes back next Friday at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time, 10:30 in Mexico City, and we'll sure enjoy a great program.
Well, thank you very much. And I can't imagine the little house parties you have with all these famous people doing all kinds of amazing things in Mexico City, Antonio. Amazing. Well, thank you very much.
Let me tell you that what
Go ahead.
No. One of the fun things is, one thing that Ibarra and Hugo haven't said is that, we look forward what we're going to be doing past. And talking about the past and what we used to do is always also very much fun.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
The reason why Toño went to Stanford was
because of you.
he would go to my fraternity parties when he was in high school. And I said, I want to be here.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Okay, well.
No, it's been a pleasure, Steve. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Toño. It's a pleasure to be with you guys today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Adios.